103 and 105 to 107, you try to do less of this kind of activity and more of this kind of activity. Now, finally, not quite finally, almost finally, some suggestions for teachers' notes. These are very quick suggestions. I just brainstormed by myself for about 3 minutes working on these. One point is, I think, use a consistent voice. Sometimes in teachers' notes what you see is that part of it's in the imperative. Do this, tell the students that, elicit that, explain this. So you're using the imperative, and then the next minute the notes say, the teacher should blah blah blah. That's switching from the second person to the third person, and it kind of doesn't read very well. And I think the best way is just to use the imperative, second person. Do this, do that, explain this, elicit that. Be consistent in your voice. Give objectives for each task. That's really crucial. All the time you need to check back with your objectives. Are you fulfilling the objectives? Now, here's a little bit of advice. I think writing teachers' notes is quite difficult. Because on the one hand, you need to cater for, you need to think about inexperienced teachers. On the other hand, the experienced teachers will say, no, I know that. Why are you telling me that? So, who are you really writing for? If you're in doubt, are you writing for the experienced teachers or the inexperienced part-time teachers we have here? Sorry? Yes, so your teacher's notes may have to give a little more advice than you think is really necessary. Push it a little bit, just say a little bit more, give a little bit more information than you think is necessary. I'm not just trying to make you work hard for the sake of it, I'm not trying to give you busy work. I'm thinking about our part-time teachers who may not have much experience and may not have used the materials before. So maybe sometimes state the obvious. Say something that's obvious just to help, or maybe for the inexperienced teachers, that by stating something obvious, you're confirming their ideas about how to do something. So I think that's an important point. Look at the task and try to anticipate possible problems for teachers. Problems with content, problems with vocabulary, language points, task complexity. I think particularly vocabulary. It's very embarrassing if a student says, what is the word for blah blah blah, and the teacher can't answer it. It's very difficult for the teacher. So there the teacher needs to try, and the teacher's book could try and anticipate vocabulary that might be necessary. And the other thing would be to encourage students to use their dictionaries for vocabulary. I'm sure, Ajahn Atibat, you can talk about dictionary use a little bit in your teacher's notes. To avoid teachers' embarrassment when students ask embarrassing questions. Provide alternatives. I mentioned this earlier. For example, deductive and inductive ways to teach a language point. So you could say, okay, two presentations. Presentation 1, presentation 2. It's up to you whether you use the words inductive and deductive. You don't have to. It's up to you. One is about the teacher explaining everything. The other is about the teacher eliciting. And for tasks with no answer keys, it's very useful to suggest possible answers, wherever possible. If you just have things like multiple choice and gap filling, then you have an answer key and it's simple, and a lot of teachers like those kinds of activities. But if you're giving more creative tasks or more real-world tasks, you cannot give a precise answer key. On the other hand, you're helping inexperienced teachers if you give possible answers. It gives the teacher some guidance about what to expect. And it also might help the teacher give feedback to the students who are having a problem. For speaking, I like these two strategies very much, communication strategies, what I call SSM and AFQ. Say something more and ask a follow-up question. Let me show you why. For SSM, students' conversations may contain only short turns very often, right? even for functions that often require long terms, like giving directions or describing travel experiences. So if you look at this little exchange here that comes from a textbook, I think it was Supergoal. Which parts of your country have you been to? And a student might just say, oh, Isan and Korat. Which other countries have you been to? Malaysia. So it's what we call monosyllabic answers, very short answers. By promoting the idea of SSM, say something more, you're getting the students to add a bit. Right, so which parts of the country have you been to? Isan and Korat. I love Isan because, something like that. It's pushing them to go the extra mile, pushing them to go the extra kilometre perhaps. Not just to give these short answers. Give me the extra metre. Which other countries have you been to? Malaysia. The food is great. It's very similar to Thai food. Something, just get them to say something more. And then the other thing is about AFQ. You look at this conversation here. This is data from my master's thesis. Students' conversations are often very unnatural. I was very proud of this when I did my MA. I was doing an MA topic on role play activities. But you can see what the cues were for student A. What were the cues? Ask about restaurants. Ask about